Hello everyone, my name is Henk Berg. I'm a cultural theorist and a professor of German at the University of Sheffield. I'm here in the University of Sheffield's John Carr Library to interview the political historian Koen Vossen. This is part of an event of the Centre for Dutch and Flemish Studies. Koen, welcome to the University of Sheffield and to the Centre for
Thank
Dutch
you.
and Flemish Studies. I want to talk about the rise of political populism in the Netherlands, and I want to take that in three parts. I first of all want to talk about the most important populist politician in the Netherlands today, Geert Wilders. So that'll be the first part of our interview. In the second part of our interview, we will go back in time a little bit and talk about his predecessors, Pim Fortuyn, Hans-Jan Maat, and Boer Koekoek. And then in the third part of this interview, I want to ask the question, are there any lessons we can learn from the situation in the Netherlands? Now, before we come on to Geert Wilders, maybe you can talk a little bit about yourself. As I say, you're a political historian. You're, among other things, the author of this book, The Power of Populism, which is about Geert Wilders and his Party for Freedom, the Partij voor de Vrijheid. But as I say, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your academic background and how you came to study political populism.
Yes, thank you for having me. So I studied history at the University of Utrecht, and the University of Utrecht then was specialized in German history also. So I did my my study for a part also in Cologne to study especially the SPD and Willy Brandt in Germany, and then after. Then I went to write my PhD at the University of Amsterdam, and my PhD was then about small political parties in the Netherlands. And the idea was the Netherlands is such a stable political system, always the same parties, and why didn't new parties manage to well, to come in between. So not communists, not fascists, not other kinds of parties, no conservatives also. And why was that the case? So when I was busy doing my research, which was then seen, I started in 1997, as quite an exotic theme, things started to change in the Netherlands. And suddenly, uh, in 2001, Pim Fortuyn came in the Netherlands and announced his candidacy, started a new party, and had a huge success after he had been assassinated. So this was quite really spectacular for the Netherlands. And then the term populism popped up. So this was a case of populism. So I was really interested then for what is this populism? And then I also started to research populism, started to read about it, and then during my studies, things were really evolving in the Netherlands. So after Pim Fortuyn came Geert Wilders, and so yeah, I kind of followed the actual events in the Netherlands in my research interest, and as a historian, yeah, I became really a contemporary historian, so to speak, and eventually ended up in political science. So I work now at the Department of Political Science at Nijmegen University. So, but I still work, you can say, in a methodological sense as a historian. So I'm not a social scientist. I am a historian, which made it for me also possible to study Geert Wilders as if it was a historical phenomenon, to keep a little bit of distance.
To keep some academic distance, because if you look at the discussion surrounding Wilders, but also populism generally, there's always, well, always is an overstatement, but that there's a lot of sort of people can get really worked up about this, and I kind of lose the kind of, I was going to say neutral, that's the wrong word, but they kind of lose this academic distance that you need in order
Absolutely.
to really understand the phenomenon.
Absolutely. And this has to do with the fact that in the Netherlands, so Pim Fortuyn came, and was then assassinated. And
This was in 2002.
2002. And shortly afterwards, there was the filmmaker Theo van Gogh was also assassinated. And the American sociologist Ron Eierman said it has caused a cultural trauma in the Netherlands. Fortuyn, shortly before he was killed, he said on television, if something would happen to me, because he already had some death threats, if something would happen to me, then it's their fault, the left wing. And then something happened. And then the same was true for Theo van Gogh. He also said always that I'm demonized by the left wing, and they were both killed. And then there was this idea in the Netherlands that the left has created an atmosphere and a lot of taboos, and discussions are really difficult. So this caused a lot of emotions, which in the Netherlands was also quite unique because we were not used to much drama in the
Yeah, it was
Netherlands.
almost a bit boring before that, and suddenly the atmosphere became very sort of divisive,
Yeah,
perhaps not unlike the political atmosphere in America at the moment.
yeah,
We'll come on to Pim Fortuyn
yeah.
in the second part of our interview. Let's look at Geert Wilders and his Party for Freedom. Let's first of all look at Geert Wilders, the man. What kind of a person is he?
Yeah, he's born in 1963 in a Catholic family in Limburg, and that is in a city called Venlo in Limburg, and that's also a relevant aspect because within the Dutch nation, Limburg is a little bit of an outlier, a little bit of an
Hmm.
outsider. People get ridiculed a bit because of their accent. It is not really seen as part of the nation. They also see themselves not really as part of the Netherlands often. And Wilders comes from this background and also has this part of his image, being the guy who represents people who are often ridiculed, as he, as a politician from Limburg, is also often ridiculed. So that's one of his aspects. So then, when he was 18 years old, after he left high school, he went to Israel to
Hmm.
work in a kibbutz. And in Israel, he really identified with the state of Israel. And he also got interested in the Middle East, in Islam, and things like that. So, but in the beginning, this did not lead to much. In 1990, when he was 26, he got a job at the parliamentary group of the conservative liberal party, the VVD. And from that moment on, he really becomes a full-time politician, a passionate politician, 24 hours a day, a real workaholic, only busy with all kinds of political things. And uh, then in 1998, he becomes member of parliament for the Conservative Liberal Party, but then he decides in 2004 to leave the parliamentary group and start his own party because he thinks that the Conservative Liberals are too left-wing and too progressive. And it's especially then about the membership of Turkey of the European
Hmm.
Union. He's very
Which
much
is very
against
much
it,
against, yes.
very much against this because Turkey is a Muslim country, and he becomes especially after 2001, the attacks, of course, in New York, the World Trade Center. In the beginning, he's asked a lot on talk shows to talk about Islamic fundamentalism, of which he knows quite a lot, of
Hmm.
one of the few people in the Netherlands. And then in the beginning, he's still kind of moderate,
Yes.
but then later he becomes a more extreme and more extreme, and then he begins to see Islam as a totalitarian ideology which is threatening Europe and the Netherlands, and he sees himself as the whistleblower, who the one who has to warn everybody for the dangers of this new fascism, as he sees it. So he breaks away from the Conservative Liberal Party, starts his own party, the Party for Freedom. And then the first elections, he gets 5.9% of the vote. Well,
This is about which year, kind of roughly?
2006. And so what happens in the Netherlands is it is a system of proportional representation with a very low threshold. So with 0.67% of the vote, you're in parliament. And if you're in parliament, you attract a lot of media attention. So from the moment on he got into parliament with his own party, 9 seats, that was his takeoff, so to speak. And then, he proved to be really able to attract media attention with all kinds of things. He launched a own movie called Fitna, in which he was portraying Islam as a totalitarian ideology and all kinds of things. And he announced that he would make this documentary, and then everywhere in the Netherlands the alarm bells went off, because shortly before you had the cartoon incidents with Denmark.
Yes.
So there were a lot of protests in the Middle East because there were some cartoons of Mohammed, the Prophet Mohammed, and people got upset, especially Pakistan, Afghanistan. Well, and Dutch diplomats, but also Dutch politicians, were really afraid that Wilders would also do something like that. And so before the documentary was there, for maybe 2 months, it was daily news. So what will happen? And then the documentary finally came, and it proved to be really amateurish kind of documentary. But he made his point. He attracted so much media attention, and that's his modus operandi. He always tries to attract this media attention by doing things which are provoking, which are shocking. To give another example, he wanted then to show fitna in different countries. So also here in England, in the UK. So, but then Gordon Brown, who was then still Prime
Prime Minister,
Minister,
yes.
had said he will not get a visa for the UK because we will not allow him to enter the country and show this movie. And what Wilders then did, he saw the opportunity. He took the airplane to London, and he with a lot of journalists behind him, and they watched him getting refused to enter the country. So also it's about nothing, it's not real important politics, but it attracts media
Yeah,
attention, and that's
that's
all
very
what
much.
it is.
Yeah, that's very much a populist technique, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Sort of taboo breaking, drawing attention to yourself.
Yeah.
So if we go just back a little bit, it's interesting. He's, as you say, he's a workaholic.
Yeah.
He's clearly a very intelligent person,
Yeah.
but he didn't go to university. So
No.
I think that kind of makes him a double outsider. There's the Limburg
Yeah.
background, as you say, and they have
Yeah.
different accent, and as you mentioned. But he is also not your sort of standard politician.
No.
You go to university and so on. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And then he's very, very quick on his feet. So he's very good in debates.
Yeah.
And as you say, he's very good at attracting media attention.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about his ideas and the ideas of his party. So what are the sort of the main pillars of his ideology
Yeah.
or political philosophy?
So first one is what you could call, I call it anti-Islam alarmism. You could call it Islamophobia. It's also a name, but I prefer this anti-Islam alarmism in the sense that he has this whole theory of Islam being a totalitarian ideology of conquest, and it's now the third time that this ideology tries to conquer Europe. After first in the 8th century, Karl Martel, and in the 17th century, the gates of Vienna, and now for the third time they are trying to conquer Europe. And for this, he has this whole theory based on a few authors also, that the left-wing elites in Europe have allowed these Muslim immigrants to come into Europe in exchange for votes, in a way. So they had the idea, oh, we're losing the working classes, we need new voters, so let's get Muslim immigrants. This is very much a conspiracy theory, of course, but he has made a whole theory about it. He names all kinds of techniques Muslims use to conquer Europe. And the most important thing is he sees Islam not as a religion with all kinds of sub divisions, and with Shia and Shiites and with all kinds of different groups. No, it's one religion or ideology, as he says, and an ideology which dominates the life of all its believers. So if you talk about Muslims in Amsterdam, or Muslims in Indonesia, or Muslims in the 17th century, they're all the same. They're all the same. And well, that's one of his core ideas. The second one then is
So just to come
populism.
back to,
Yeah,
to that for a moment. So is this linked to this conspiracy theory, which is called the Great Replacement
yeah,
theory? So the idea that Islam, as you say, it's a political ideology that is very deliberately trying to take over Europe, not by military means, as it did in the past, but through coming over here,
yeah,
as it were, having many more children than the people who were born in this country, and so imposing ultimately Sharia law on
yeah,
Western European countries. That is the
yeah.
conspiracy.
Eurabia. At first
Yes,
it was called Eurabia. It is close to the Great Replacement theory. Yeah, true.
and the idea is then also, correct me if I'm wrong, that he can say, I'm not so much against individual Muslims if they're already here and they adhere to our laws and they are assimilated. That's fine. But then again, first of all, there is a real problem with Islam, which he sees as political Islam. And second, because they're Muslims, you can never really be sure where their loyalties lie.
Yeah, true. So one of the things he believes is that Islam has a specific idea of what he calls taqiyya. And this means that Muslims are allowed to lie in a hostile environment and hide their real purposes. So if you believe this, then if a Muslim has adapted himself, is a social democrat or a liberal, you cannot really believe him or her because it could be taqiyya. That's of course a kind of a circular argument, and it can never be falsified. So that's the first thing. The second
And
is,
it's very similar to the kind of scapegoating that we've seen in the past with Jews, for example.
yeah,
Their real loyalties are not with the fatherland, but with international Jewry
yeah,
or with Roman Catholicism. You know, the real loyalties are with the Pope and
yeah.
so on. So it's that kind of conspiracy theory,
Yeah, yeah,
basically.
yeah, absolutely. So these are not loyal members of your nation. These are people you should distrust.
Mhm.
Yeah, so, and then the difference between Islam and Muslims. He always makes this difference. He said, I have nothing against Muslims, I have something against Islam. That's his mantra always.
Mhm.
And well, this is of course a strange thing to say. So saying that you are not against the individuals or the persons, but only against, yeah, then the ideology as such, as if there is an ideology without people. As if you can say I'm against music but not against musicians or something. So this is connected to each other, but it is, I think, also a way of avoiding being persecuted legally. Because if he says I have something against Muslims, then, well, this
That
is
they
discrimination.
can prosecute you and say, yes, that's right.
And now he can say, well, no, this is religion criticism. This is something which is allowed. I can criticize Islam like I criticize communism or fascism. So he makes it in that sense different.
That's so
But
that's
it's almost
yeah.
so where you really saw that the difference, well, that there's really a gray zone between these things, is when he suddenly said after, in 2001, was it 2016, or I think he had this meeting in which he suddenly said, I want to have fewer Moroccans. Do you also want to have fewer Moroccans? And then he says, okay, it's about Moroccans. It's not about Muslims, it's about Moroccans. And there you see that it's always, this gray zone, and there are a lot of dog whistles in it. And so, but this is, so this anti-Islam That's in a way the core. But
Mhm.
what is also makes it so rhetorically very attractive is that it links Islam to the elites. The elites being the ones who have who have made it possible that all these Muslims come into your country, who have opened the border, and who maybe even have a meaning with it by getting a new electorate, by new constituency. So it's in their interest. And then he comes to this populist part in which he says the elites, this is second pillar, we have very wrong, evil elites, left-leaning elites, progressive elites who don't care about the common people. And the common people who are just hardworking people are taking all the load of immigration. They suffer, and the elites just, they live in their own nice neighborhoods without immigrants. And so he makes this whole caricature about,
Yes.
and yeah, if you are going into this populist discourse, you have, of course, a lot of examples you can name and a lot of fun you can make about the elites being, always virtue signaling and about in their nice subsidized jobs and in
Always, yeah, they have their cushy jobs, and then it's easy to be politically correct, and they're forcing their wokeism on us also.
others, and they make the most awful paintings, and they,
Yeah,
this kind of,
yeah.
we know this also from the past. So, and then the third pillar
The third pillar, yes.
is a nationalism, and is also close to populism, you can say. Yeah? Nationalism is then the idea in his more in a nativist way. So your own people first. So it's not an aggressive nationalism per se. It's not like I want to conquer other countries or we are better than the rest. Although he has had some ideas about a reunification with Flanders, but it was, well, not really serious. This was probably a way to attract media attention, but more your own people first. Your own people first when it comes to social security. In your foreign policy, it's about your own people. As Trump would say, America first. So the Netherlands first. About eventually also leaving the European Union, an exit, because the European Union imposes all kinds of legislation for the Netherlands, which is bad for the Netherlands. And so
Does he still believe that? So if you look
yeah,
at France, for example, so the National Front, which is now called the National Rally,
yeah,
they were very much in favor of that, but then they've kind of moved away from that.
yeah. He also
Whereas,
softened it.
yeah, okay,
He softened this viewpoint because he saw that, uh, well, in the Netherlands, it didn't really resonate. Nexit. The highest number of people in favor of Nexit is maybe something like 20-25%, but not much more than that, because. Well, I think a few reasons. One of the reasons is that people see Brexit and they don't see that it is a big success. So that is a reason. The second is that almost all Dutch realize that the Netherlands has a very open economy, which is dependent especially on Germany. And it would be economically very stupid to leave the European Union. That's quite easy to explain to the Dutch. So he softened this viewpoint. He now says, I want to have a referendum like in Great Britain about the European Union, and in this referendum, I would say leave. That is now his official viewpoint. So then he's also really much in favor, that's also important, for glorifying our national culture and our national past. So I think, like in the UK, we've seen also in the Netherlands discussions about the role of the Netherlands in colonial exploitation, in slave trade, all these things. And he says, well, that should stop. That should stop. We will never apologize for a glorious past, and this is typically this left-wing elite, the down with us elite, as he calls this. with their own left-wing hobbies. And so we should stop this. We should glorify our past, and we should be proud of our past. And also traditions like Black Piet, which is a typical Dutch tradition, or the children's celebration of Sinterklaas, which is then helped by Black Piet, who was always painted black. Well,
Yeah,
then,
yeah, a blacked up sort of servant of Saint Nicholas. Yeah,
yeah. And then, so from, you could say, the 2010, it became more and more a discussion, isn't this a racist symbol? And more people realized, yeah, maybe it is. And Geert Wilders just says, no, never. Black Pete is a national tradition and it should never be abolished. And it's,
yeah.
yeah, it belongs to the Dutch. And
It's
so,
interesting for people who don't know much about Dutch populism,
yeah,
how incredibly similar the discourse is when you compare it, for example, to Donald Trump, who was also talking about, we should keep these statues of
yeah,
Confederate soldiers and so on, or to Germany, where the Alternative für Deutschland, the AfD, that right-wing populist party that you have in Germany, they also constantly, I was going to say, banging on about, we Germany, we are way too obsessed with the past and we should look
yeah,
ahead and so on. There was this famous stroke infamous conversation between Alice Weidel and Elon Musk, where both of them said exactly the
yeah,
same thing. So it's a weird kind of nationalism. Just like in America, they're not saying we want to bring slavery back and we want to bring segregation back, but at the same time, it's sort of an overemphasizing of one's own traditions, including racist and deeply problematic traditions.
yeah, no, absolutely. It's also, I also had to think about Vox in Spain. They are the party who says bullfighting, that's our tradition. And everybody can say that we should abolish it. We will not do it. And Franco was not so bad. And all these kinds of things. You see it everywhere,
Yes,
this
yeah,
idea that uh, the bad things from your national past, you should never acknowledge this. You should just say everything was okay, and we should not apologize for these things. And who are those immigrants to say to us that we should apologize?
yeah,
That's also a kind of the subtext here.
yeah. And who are these elites
Yeah,
to force that kind of wokeism
yeah,
down our throats?
yeah.
So we've got anti-Islamic alarmism. We've got the criticism of the elites. We've got nationalism. What are sort of the other ingredients of?
Well, the fourth is, I think, a stress on law and order. So the idea that if you, there is, let's say, there is a natural order, and if you if somebody you offend this natural order, or you do something which does not fit within this natural order, or then you're crazy, you're stupid, or you should be punished really hard. So weird things is, for example, weird kind of schools, or weird behavior. And the thing is, that's typically here quite strange. In the Netherlands, for example, LHBTQ is quite accepted.
Mhm.
So it is not per se homophobic. That would not work in the Netherlands. It's also not sexist, but there's this subtext that, but it should not be too much out in the open. That's weird. Yeah, so we accept it. We are very liberal. We are very open to these things, but not like the left wants it. That you have a gay parade and that you have this women's emancipation that goes too far. That's weird. That's against the natural order. Also, a strong
Does
punish.
he stress that? Because as you say, it's a tricky one in the Dutch
Yeah,
context, isn't it? Because
yeah,
Holland is still, when it comes to, for example, homosexuality, it is a very liberal country.
yeah,
Homosexuality over the last 10 years in Western Europe, including in Britain, has become basically accepted.
yeah,
So you can't really go against that. You would pay for that electorally, and
yeah,
obviously that's not what he wants. But then at the same time, there is this sort of attachment to the tradition, to the ways, to the
Well,
way things have been done for a very long time. That's a difficult sort of balance for him
yeah.
to find.
So what he does is, so on one hand, he says, okay, I protect our women and our gays against Islam. So I'm much more for women and for gays because I see the real dangers. On the other hand, he's also, well, let's put it that way. Let's put it another way. So jokes about women or jokes about gays, well, you should laugh about it. That's okay. That's fine. And so it's always this double message in his rhetorics. So he supports a man like Orban.
Yeah.
That's a good friend of him in Hungary, who is very anti-gay. So
At the same time, even Orban at some point has said, I haven't got anything against gay people as long as you said, basically, as long as they're sort of, they don't do a gay parade, they're not walking down the street
yeah,
being obviously gay, and so on.
you also see it with women. So he knows very well how to attack the weakest link, so to speak. And the weakest link for him is mostly women, higher educated left-wing women. He sees that as, well, this is the weakest link. I'm going to have because they are often seen by the common man as arrogant or woke or whatever. So it's the mayor of Amsterdam, for example, Femke Halsema, is one of his favorite targets. You had the left liberal minister Sigrid Kaag. He referred to her often as a witch, and take your broom and get away. Um, but also female journalists. This does not mean that he's in that sense sexist, but right-wing women are okay. Meloni is great, Marine Le Pen, she's great. But if they're left-wing and they're a little bit higher educated, it's kind of for him a motive in itself to attack them,
Yeah,
to
it's
mock them.
it's interesting there again to see the parallels with America, for example, right?
Yeah,
Because Trump is doing exactly the same thing. So on the one hand, so first of all, you've got this discourse, jokes about women and so on. That's not the problem. Come on, that's just locker room
yeah,
talk.
yeah,
Boys will be boys, and so on. So you have that, and then at the same time, you see this very basically misogynistic attack, as you say, on a certain type of woman.
yeah,
Um, with agency, autonomous, well educated. So the way Trump attacked Hillary Clinton
yeah,
and the way he attacked Kamala Harris,
yeah,
and you've got this political advert that Trump did, which is about Kamala Harris, saying Kamala is for they stroke them, Trump is for you,
yeah,
and really playing to this idea
yeah,
that the elites, they're only out for themselves, they're globalists, they're basically kleptocratic, and so on. And I, Donald Trump or Geert Wilders, I am your voice, as Trump
yeah,
literally says. So
yeah,
it's what Nixon called the silent majority. They're
yeah.
trying to play to what they perceive to be the silent majority.
Yeah, yeah. It's also Jörg Haider in Austria is one of the first who pioneered here, and he once had this slogan: "They are against him because he is for you."
Yeah, yeah,
And that's this idea like, okay, I take all the dirt, because I do it for you,
yeah, yeah.
and that's his martyrdom almost.
One final question before
Yeah.
we look at Wilders' predecessors in the second part of this interview. Um, where is Geert Wilders now, and how do you see sort of his development? His party won the November 2023 elections. It became the biggest party in Holland. He ended up in a coalition government. That coalition government did not last very long.
Yeah.
Um, Now, then there were new elections, and Wilders' party was a very, very close second. They almost won these elections. Is there still, can we write him off, or is it too early to say that?
Well, he was written off many times. So in 2012, people thought, well, now it's over. In 2017, people thought it, and he always came back So that's really difficult to say. So what we saw is when he was in 2023 the big winner, you immediately saw his main problem, and that's the fact that he has no party organization. It's a in German you would call it an Einzelgänger, a loner, a
Yes.
man who doesn't like to be in a social environment. He works alone. He sits in his room, thinks of all his Twitter accounts and what to do. And he has no party organization, literally, because his party does not allow members. So there's only one member in his
And
organization.
that's he himself.
That's he himself. So what then happens is there are of course people he needs for doing all the things, a member of parliament or minister, but these are not real talented people because also he does not like talented people around him. He should be the one who is in charge of everything. So he needed ministers in 2023 when he made this coalition. And he came with ministers who, well, were so unskilled and so untalented, and everybody saw it except for himself. And yeah, this led to all kinds of pain, painful dramas, of real, well, embarrassing things. You know, one had read somewhere on the internet that Zelensky was never chosen by the Ukrainian people, and people said, "Well, that's just not true. Just fake
What are
news."
you talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, that's just fake news. You read it probably in some Russian propaganda. Oh yeah, is it? And the strangest mistakes and blunders, and so a lot of conflicts. So it ended then in 2025, and then people thought, okay, now um, the voters will punish him. And well, some did. So he went from 23.5% to 16.6, but still 16.6%, second place, as you said. Is it over now?
Especially in the Dutch political landscape where you have so many parties.
Yeah. And the ones who left did not go back to the center parties. No, they went for a large part, to a part which is even more extreme, the Forum for Democracy of Thierry Baudet. So still 30% of our electorate in the Netherlands is voting for what you could say a radical right populist party. So 30%, that's quite a lot. And 16.5 or 16.6% then votes for Geert Wilders. Is it over for him? Yeah, well, after the election, some of his more loyal colleagues left his parliamentary group. They came also with all kinds of, things in the media, all kinds of negative stories about Wilders in the media, and this did not help. On the other hand, well, as I've said before, Wilders is first of all very skillful in just ignoring bad news. So he always thinks, well, we should not rub into it, you know, just let it go, and then people will forget. And he was very lucky that Donald Trump decided to attack Iran on the same day that this news came out. So probably he will be back, but I don't think that he will ever be in a coalition again. So that's really over.
Yeah, well, never again. I agree, but one can never really be sure, right? I mean, everyone had written off Donald Trump, and he came back as well. So
That's
we'll have to wait and see. Thank you very much for talking so extensively about Geert Wilders. In the second part of this interview, we will look at his most famous predecessors. Thank you very much.